Hello and welcome to this week's QuickBooks Enterprise Deep Dive webinar. I am going to be your host today. My name is Kat Roskovics and we're going to be going through custom reports. So today the topics that we're going to cover when talking about custom reports, we're going to be going through preferences first, and then talking about using the find, looking at the transaction detail report and the custom summary report. We're also going to be looking at combining reports from multiple QuickBooks files. So I'm just going to get into my test file here that I have set up. And before I'm going through any topic, I always like to see what the preferences are around that area, because there might be something there that I want to change before I start really getting into reports themselves. So I'm going to go to Edit and Preferences. And I'm going to select that Reports and Graphs tab. And then on this My Preferences tab here, I've got a couple of options. So these would apply only to me versus company, which is going to apply to all users. We'll get onto those in a second. But first, we're going to look at the My Preferences. So we have prompt to modify report options before opening a report. So we'll see that here when we look at the custom summary and custom transaction detail reports. Those do that automatically, but you do have the option. If you check that box, you'll get that customization screen when you run any report before it'll actually display the report. So you'll see your filters and any ways that you can modify. So you can select those there, and then it will display the report. You also have the option to have a prompt when it needs to refresh or refresh automatically. So if you're looking at a report, you double click to get into a transaction, you modify that transaction, you get out of it, you still have the report up. QuickBooks can pop up and prompt you to refresh, or it can just update it automatically, or you can say don't refresh at all. So again, maybe sometimes if you have a larger company file, or some of those refreshes can take longer if you're looking at a really intricate report, this might be something that you want to turn off temporarily or modify the preferences here temporarily, or even for the long term. So graphs, just talking about how 2D graphs will help the file, or when you're running those reports, will help them run a little bit faster. And then using patterns, so that only applies to, the pie charts and bar graphs and that kind of stuff that are built into some of the reports. Then we have our company preferences. So our report basis that we're going to run our reports on as a default. Now, a lot of reports will also allow you to change them to a cash basis if you're set up to run on accrual. We usually coach clients to keep their reports on accrual. And then, if they need to flip them to cash for some things like commission reporting, as an example, is a big one, you could flip it on that individual report. We also have some preferences around how we're going to age reports. So on our AP aging summary or AP or AR aging summary, whether we want that report to age from the due date or from the transaction date. So, if you have an invoice dated July 1st and it's due on the 31st, is it going to show up in that 30 days on the 1st, or is it going to show up there on the 31st? So those are options as well. Reports, so showing items by name only, description only, or name a description. So sometimes you might have your items set up where the item name is, like a SKU or number, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, instead of green widget, as an example. So it's probably going to make more sense to you when you're running any sort of sales by item summary reports or that kind of stuff to pick description only, or maybe name a description, versus if your items are named something like green widget, then you know what that is and you can pick name only. Let's see, report, so show accounts by, so similar. Usually the account name is enough. The account number will also be shown if you are using account numbers. Description is the description of that account in the chart of accounts, and the name of description is, of course, both of those fields. Usually name only is where we're seeing that. How we're going to classify any cash in our statement of cash flows. And then this one here, default formatting for reports. So this is where Click on this. We have to uncheck the box first, or it's going to apply the default that's set up inside of QuickBooks. So we have all of these different areas of the report. So company name, if we want that to be displayed differently than I have it set up in my company file for some reason, I can change this and it will apply across all of the reports that I'm going to run. The report title is something that will pull from that report specifically, but if you have another title you want to show all the time, you can change it there. And then also subtitle, what date it was prepared. So that would be the date that shows up in this top left corner. What time. So if we don't want it to show that information for whatever reason, we can change that. Just kind of freeing up some real estate on the page. Of course, if we have the more stuff we have on a report, the more stuff people can look at on that report. So if there's some areas we would rather them be focusing on the numbers and not some of these other pieces here, then we can turn those off. And then also on our fonts and numbers here, you can see that these kind of correlate over here to my report, right? My title and all of that stuff. So if there was, like, I wanted the company name to have a different font size or color, I can do that as well. And then that will apply to all of the reports that I run from this file. You can also change your formatting for negative numbers. So if you want those to show up in bright red so they stick out a little bit more, you can do that. Trailing minus is, of course, having that minus show at the end of the number instead. I'm going to go ahead and leave that as normally. And then if you want your reports to be a little bit more streamlined, sometimes folks will choose to run them without cents. So instead of something showing, 100.00, it'll just show 100. So that's something that can make them a little bit easier too. Just going to hit cancel here because I'm going to let it stay as is for right now. All right. So now we're going to talk about custom reports specifically. So one of the things that I like to do when I am on with a client and I'm trying to create a report for them is I start with the find. So I just go to Control F. You can also go to Edit and Find. Control F right there, right? It's going to show you what that shortcut key is. And that pulls up this screen here. Now, if I'm on an invoice screen as an example, voice is turned on. Let's do sales receipts. If I'm on a sales receipt screen and I do Control F, it's going to just look for sales receipts only because that's the transaction I'm on. But if I click on advanced, it'll take me over to this screen. Now, if I click on find, it's going to show me every single transaction that's in this file and all the lines related to that transaction. So if I have a really large company file and I just clicked find, it might take a little bit of time to pull all of that information, but that is a way to see everything that's in there. Now, let's say that I wanted to look at a report on invoices only. I can change my transaction type to invoiced. And then this is only going to show me the lines that are related to invoice transactions. We've got the header line, right, which is the line that has the customer, accounts receivable, maybe some information on the memo. And then we have the other lines, which are the, transaction details, right, the debits and credits on that invoice as well. So if I click into this one as an example, these are my lines that are on here, and this area up here is all of my header information. So if I'm looking for, like, I could see on their services, right? So if I wanted to see all invoices that had the services line on them, I can hit find, and I've only just got that one. Now, if I click on this report, it's going to display a report with whatever I've searched for in that find area. Once I have this showing, I can further customize this report. If I don't need to see split because I know it's an invoice and it's going to be splitting to accounts receivable, I could take that off. If I wanted to see, instead of debits and credits, if I wanted to see my amount, right, I can change that. It just makes it a little bit easier to digest the information. If there was a negative here, of course, it's going to, if I had given a credit back as an example for services, but on an invoice, instead of issuing a credit memo, it's going to show up here. This balance may be duplicative because I'm going to have my total here anyways. And then I can also add some of those other things that I might want to see on that are going to pull from that header. Now, here's an example right here of where, click on this one. All right. So I didn't have terms filled in there. So I just switched those to due on receipt, and I can see they're displayed in that area. Now, some fields will only be displayed on the if we're only running a report on those header lines, so those ones that are accounts receivable, versus if we're running on some of the detail lines that we have down here, we won't be able to see those. So it just kind of depends on what fields you're looking at. You can definitely kind of play around, like you saw, like I was like, oh, terms should definitely be showing up on here. Why isn't it? And I clicked into it and I saw there's not term setup, right? So those are kind of some ways to get this information onto here. Now, one thing is that if we have custom reports set up, or custom fields set up rather, on customer records, those oftentimes will only display on the header line. So when I'm running a report and I wanted to filter based on a certain custom field that I might have set up for this customer, and what I mean by that is if I go to my test customer 3 and I look at additional info over here, I don't have any set up. But if I did and I had information there, then sometimes again, when we're trying to run something on the detail lines of a particular invoice, might not be able to see that custom information, because usually for running it on the line level, we actually want that custom field to be filled in on that line level, because then we can filter on it as well. But in here, when we go to customize, we can see all of the columns that we have available. So sometimes, although it's not my preferred method, if I'm having trouble finding something, or I really am not sure how I need to fill the data in, which fields I'm going to be able to see on the report, then you can also just select all of these if you want, right? And it will show all of the ones that have data in them. Like we can see PO here, right? I filled in a PO number. That's definitely on the header area of the invoice, but it is populating, even though this is a line detail level report I'm looking at here. And then, of course, you can drag and drop these over. If there's some that you don't need anymore, right? Once you see there's no data in them, that's definitely an option too. And then from here, if this is a report that we wanted to be able to run in the future, then we might want to memorize that report. One thing that I usually advise clients on is if we're memorizing a report, we don't want to memorize it for, like, I would not put in July 1st through July 31st here. If I wanted to run it for this month, then I would choose that relative date from this drop down. So I would say, see this month right here. That way, whenever I memorize this report and I go to run it the next time, it's going to default to this month, right? I'm not going to see July 1st, 2025 through July 31st, 25 forever every time I run this report. So that is, that's important to note as well. Now, there's another way to kind of get to something similar, and that's called a custom transaction detail report. So if we look down here in this custom reports area, I'm going to pick on transaction detail. And so this is that box that's going to pop up. We talked a little bit about that in preferences. If you have the one turned on for the modify to show up before the report, it's going to look like this. Custom transaction detail report is going to do that every time because you have to tell it what you want to see on the report, right? Because it's a custom report. So going into here, if I wanted to say this month, kind of get to some of that same information that I was looking at before. So transaction type invoice, I had my item, services, and then I say display. I wanted to see my PO number. And I'm just going to flip that back to all. So it brought up that same information, and then again, I can customize it from here. So that's why custom transaction detail report is great. I tend to just go to that find. I don't know, I like that screen better for whatever reason, but custom transaction detail report will get you there as well. And then again, adding all your columns that you want, how you want to see them, who entered last modified by. That's something that I do look at pretty often. Sometimes I find that audit trail report can be a little cumbersome to dig through. So if I'm on with a client and we're looking at a transaction and it doesn't look right, you can even just go into that transaction specifically, go to transaction journal, which will just pull up the debits and credits. And then from here, I can customize it to see who put it in and when. Let's see here. So then looking at the other report, which is custom summary, and this is, if you've heard any of my webinars in the past, this is probably one of my favorite reports. So this kind of allows you to run a report in QuickBooks that's similar to a pivot table if you only have like 2 dimensions that you're running it by, right? So I can pick what I want my columns to be by. So if I said month, and what I wanted my rows to be by, set account list. A couple of the filters that are automatically applied to this report and may need to be removed based on which report you're running. So if I'm running it on the balance sheet as an example, I'm not going to see anything if I leave this one on. I am running mine on income expense, but so that's important to know. And then again, the date is running. I'm just looking at this month to date. So if I said all, and then I'm just going to say, okay, here. Then it's going to show me a breakout. So this is basically my trial balance by month end for all the time that there's transactions in this file. So we can see here my total is 0, and it is displaying in the normal order, right, where debits are positive, credits are negative. So some other systems will display single column trial balance reports. This is a way that we get there inside of QuickBooks without having to take the regular trial balance report, dump it out into Excel, and then of course combining those columns together. So that is important to note. The other thing I wanted to show is that when I click customize report here, I set up those defaults maybe, but if there's, for whatever reason, I want this report to show something different, right? If I wanted to say trial balance month over month, and it's going to change this title up here. And then again, if I wanted to memorize it, that would be a change that is going to stay in this report. So any of those additional modifications you make, those ones that we looked at on preferences are definitely just on the company side. And then maybe on this particular report, I don't want to see cents, right? Because I want it to be super high level. I can change that as well. Okay, let's see. So now we're going to look at another feature that I get questions about. It's probably one of the cool features of Enterprise for sure is combining reports from multiple company files. So what this allows you to do is if you have different companies that are set up, so let's say you have your main company and then maybe the building that your business is in is actually owned by a separate LLC or whatever that you have set up. And that company also has its own set of books. You wanted to run a report across both of those. Maybe that LLC also owns some other properties that are, rented to other businesses that are not yours. Um, you would be able to do that. So if I come in here and I say reports and I go to combine reports from multiple companies, this is a list of the reports that I can combine. So sales by customer summary, that one's pretty cool, right? Because if we have a need to start a new QuickBooks file for whatever reason, and we want to be able to see some of that sales data from the old one without having to bring those transactions into the new file, we can do that. If you're also using classes, it will allow you to run a profit and loss by class. But I'm going to just pick balance sheet and profit and loss for right now. I can pick my report or my date range rather. So I'm just going to run this. It looks like it's defaulting to last month, which is fine. And then I'm going to add files. So this is where you pick the other company files that you want. If you had multiple ones, then if you click on that one and you hit control and you click on the other one, it will grab them all. I'm just going to pick this one here, but I could also do it one at a time if I wanted to, if I didn't know that control tip. So I'm going to pick the two companies here. I'm going to run those reports from. So what it's going to do is it's going to cycle through these company files. It's going to pull the report information from those relevant company files. Because it's cycling through, it is going to prompt me to enter in the username and password for each report from each file. So I'm going to have to enter that 2 times for the sample consulting business. I already have this one open, so I'm going to have to enter it 1 time for the other report from the file that I'm currently in. So if I say combine reports in Excel, it's just a sample company file. So then it's grabbing, I think, the balance sheet. And that file, I'm going to enter it again so it can grab the profit and loss information. And it's going to cycle back through the one that I was just in to grab the profit and loss from that one. Okay. And so I'm going to click over here. As soon as this is done, it is going to combine those into Excel. And what it does is there will be 1 tab per report with your columns for each company file. So if I look at this report, file that I had open is in this column. That second file is over here. And then I can see the total for those files. Now, something to note is that if you are going to use this feature, it is best if the accounts are named the same, have the same type and the same number if they are the same account, right? So if I had inventory, I don't know why I have inventory in my consulting business, but I do. So if I had inventory in this file as well, and that inventory account was just called inventory or didn't have the asterisk, then it's going to show that on a separate line. So when it sums those numbers together, it's not going to be super easy to compare because we're going to see inventory on one line with the total and then inventory on another line from that other file with the total. So definitely looking at having a consistent chart of accounts across the files that you're going to be combining together is important. Now, of course, the income side, which I don't have any income in here for June, but the income side, right, might vary based on the type of industry that company is in, right? So that is pretty normal, but your general and admin expenses that fall down below that gross profit line should pretty much be consistent across industries and across company files. So those would be the ones I would really target to make sure that they are consistent. And then, of course, our bank accounts, right? Like we have one set up as bank account and we have company checking account. Well, this is probably the company checking account, right? So I could rename that account in my test company file. And when I consolidated those together, it would show, 200 here and show me my actual total for my company checking accounts. So that's another pretty cool report to run. It does not do any sort of back out intercompany column. So if you need to do that, you do have to do that on the report itself. But it definitely does save a lot of time from exporting reports out from different company files into Excel and consolidating those together and cutting and pasting and all of that nonsense. It definitely makes it a lot easier here. All right, so that takes us to the end of our session. Thank you so much for joining today. I hope you learned something and I hope you have a fantastic rest of the week.